Hello, my friend. Today we are going to talk about democracy. Yes, it is democracy, which is generally discussed but ignored in most of the context of developing world, especially in a country of Pakistan, because of the fact we have the history where democracy failed. Was it fail or was hijacked by military establishment, feudal class, who ultimately inherited Pakistan from the cruel British monarchical rule. So, today we are going to explore how democracy evolved, how, in the context of democracy, can be beneficial, and what lessons we can take away from the world, and what are the challenges democracy is facing across the landscape of humanity. In the context of Pakistani debate, or you can say general debate among common people, you will see that people want easy solution of complex issues, and that's the reason they adopt those mechanisms which are helpful for them in a very short term way, but in a long term, their after effects they sadly to say don't know. But still, I consider that the people of Pakistan are more faithful to the territory of this land as opposed to the ruling elite. So my question to all of you is that why still democracy is the most prevalent, most prominent factor across the world? It is up to you. You can respond me in your critical analysis, but I am going to start the democracy from the critical examination of its origin, then to its fundamental pillars, and after we will see in the context of Pakistan how it failed and how it can be nurtured in a way that can uplift the marginalized communities of Pakistan, because it is said by former American president, democracy of the people, for the people, and by the people. But the fact of the matter still remains that still it is manipulated by the few elite class who has the capacity to manipulate our opinion, our thoughts, and ultimately hijack our mind while casting the vote. We tend to become casteist, ignorant, and short-term vision, ultimately commit those mistakes on our part that results in failure in not only short term but also long term. So the origin of democracy is very painful. Yes, you can say it is very painful, my friend, because of the fact that democracy evolved not in its own way. It is the middle class efforts, the rise of middle class after the Protestant Revolution and Industrial Revolution that inculcated a sense of individual freedom across the Western world. And that realization emerged in the many revolutions, like in Glorious Revolution, which took place in England. Same is the case with French Revolution, and similarly the Russian Revolution. In these cases, you will find that middle class were at front of war with elite class. Although after the revolution, you can see that still the most of the population didn't have the right of vote, like the women were ignored, similarly the propertyless class and the class of marginalized communities, even after the French Revolution and its constitution, they were ignored in the constitution of French. Why? Because it was the middle class who were more aspirational, more powerful as opposed to the rest of the community, especially in the marginalized communities. They took the power into the hands and they reshaped the history of Europe by emphasizing on equality for opportunity, equality of right, equality in all domains of life. Obviously, equality in itself is utopia, but in the context of a world where people were either slave or either ruler, it was very important to realize the fact that how important it is to enjoy the equal treatment. All competitions collapse when you don't have equality in all domains of life. If a boy from a rural background lack quality education still pass university education and become a graduate. He is not going to compete a person who's sitting in a Harvard University with better knowledge, teaching staff, and the scientific temperament which will be instilled in his mind. That's the reason this difference that results from the inequality and generate injustices across the landscape of the world was annihilated from the rise of the middle class spotted revolution against the hegemony of elite class. That is how it started evolving. In initial stages, it was obviously under the hegemony of still that elite class, but gradually and steadily, European world evolved. It took them 300 to 400 years to become a truly democratic state. Still, in the current statistics of the World Bank report, that United States of America ranks among the flawed democracy, just as Pakistan rank amongst the hybrid regime. How to overcome this challenge, we are going to discuss afterward. But as of now, we have to understand what are the fundamental pillars of democracy. It is obviously equality before laws, accountability, justice. These, I think, are the fundamental pillars of democracy. Without it, democracy tend to become a tyranny against a weaker person. And in the context of Pakistan, we can easily observe the fact that common Pakistani is suffering from numerous issues. But on the flip side of the coin, you will find a person who belong to powerful background not only is going to become a prime minister of Pakistan, but even also going to rule till the last bit of his life. That is a dilemma because if a person who is from marginalized community or from poor background lack the capacity to reshape his destiny, even the destiny of his people, of his country, then who is going to determine the destiny? Obviously, the ruling elite, and they always ensure their individual personal rights right at the top of all. That's the reason self servicing attitude among politicians, among journals, among judges, it has become the order of the day. And this is exactly what caused Pakistan havoc from the very first day to up until now. That Pakistan was carved out of the map of greater India from the efforts of common Muslims, but it was hijacked by the ruling elite and the nexus of bureaucracy, military, as well as politicians. These politicians are not the aspirational stamp paper of common Pakistanis. That's a sad fact that they are from the feudal background. They always support their individual interests and ignore the interest of the largest society. And that's the reason Pakistan is suffering from constitutional crisis from the very first day to up until now. How to deal that crisis? We need to learn from the lessons from of the other worlds. Of like we have the example of America, we have the example of China as well as you can say France. In these countries, system of democracy was respected and it was the political will of masses that ensured that evolution is more important than the ad hocism which is generally adopted in Pakistan under the garb of martial law regimes which ultimately failed Pakistan in all domains of life. So that is why in 1991, Pakistan was ahead of India in many of socio-economic indicators. As of now, Pakistan is lagging behind from India just because of ad hocism. We didn't rely on the process, which obviously take time, and institutional interference wreak havoc on Pakistan. That is why we are suffering from all of these challenges. So, how these countries evolve in a better way as opposed to Pakistan? Whether you talk about America, France, and China, you will find one thing is common: justice is right at the top of all. Justice delayed is justice denied. That's an unfortunate and realistic fact which is ignored in the context of Pakistan. but they ensure that justice is going to prevail. That's the reason a boy from a lower humble background ultimately become a prime minister or president, or you can say in the context of America, just like Barack Obama. So if the representation come from the rural and economically marginalized background, then ultimately your nation has become a true victorious nation. It is providing you equality, equal opportunity, fair competition. That is why, in the context of Pakistan, providing quality education to all is the way forward. Providing healthcare facilities is very instrumental. With these two factors, we will be able to create a society which is based on equality, and that equality will ultimately help us in a long term. This is the way forward, which adopted by the most of the Western world and all of the developed countries, and that's the reason they became truly successful. In my understanding, democracy is the only way forward. There is no military rule that can uplift Pakistan from all of these crises. There is no any other rule, or you can say a technocratic rule, but it's a rule of the people under the representation of masses. Politicians must be held accountable after 5 years of elections. If it is not going to happen, Pakistan will remain in the vicious cycles of self-destruction, and that has causing danger to the destiny of Pakistan. So we need to reevaluate what are the challenges we have. Like the social structure we have is so backward, people are, rather than adopting their individual freedom, tend to suppress their personal choices under the suppression of society. And what is society of Pakistan? It is driven by backward values, ruled by selfish attitude, and ultimately result is that they are divided in caste, creed, color, and you can say sect. That's the reason Pakistan has been embroiled in sectarian war, in ethnic wars. You can see from the context of Karachi, you can see from the context of even the prevailing war between Pakistan army and the Afghan terrorists over the territory of KPK. What does it mean by it? It gives the glimpse of the fact that without adopting these important values of individual freedom and opening your mind to think critically, it is not going to happen. And because without adopting these values, not a single person in a Pakistani society is going to take ownership of his actions, and the collective will always be the will of the ruling elite. So it is very important to develop an individual, because that individual will try his level best, not only for the society but also for himself or herself, that how important it is to be the custodian of human rights. Once the critically aware nation or masses emerge, you will see the after effects of democracy in a better way. Otherwise, this system was hijacked by ruling elite, is hijacked by ruling elite, and will remain